Playing Possum Podcast.
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 Oh, hey y'all. Welcome to Jamey's Dream House. It is just me. Catherine and Casey are off doing Catherine and Casey things, though they will rejoin me in the next pod as we wrap up our first year. Believe it or not, we've been doing it a whole year. Today, since I have y'all all to myself, I thought I would share a new little piece of writing. I think the last time it was just Jamey, I shared my first blog post for Playing Possums. Today, I'm going to be sharing Milepost 15, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted. It is paired with the painting Magnolia number 1, which is dangerously close to completion. I thought it would be done in the summertime, but that ain't what happened. Also wanted to take this opportunity to sort of talk about the writing element of my studio practice. This was totally unexpected. It was a development I didn't see coming, but not necessarily that I felt like something was missing, but I wanted to add something more. My image choice, all things Southern, seems very universal, though it does come from a personal place. Everything that I share, I've photographed and staged personally, just so that it is, original. It's not clip art. But I felt like it could use another personal touch or element, hence the milepost. And once I started writing, the floodgates just opened, and apparently all of these stories, all these experiences with family, a lot of loss, a lot of grief in the years since I've been a Natchezian. I am currently a resident of Natchez, Mississippi. I am the odd man out when it comes to Catherine and Casey, your local Oregonians. This is my parents' hometown. I was originally in Atlanta, and that's how Catherine and I know one another. We grew up there together. But when I finished school, I found myself here in Natchez, and I've stayed over a decade. I'm what they call a Natchezian, not someone who was born and raised here, but someone who's chosen to call this place home on their own. And these have been good years, and it's given me the opportunity to really get to know my family in a way that I didn't growing up as a kid, just visiting on the holidays for Christmas and summers and stuff like that. And losing so much of my family along the way, I realized that committing these stories and our good times to memory was a poor choice. And so I just started writing. And again, floodgates opened, and all these years later, I think I started 2018, spring of 2018. 7 years later, I'm up to Milepost 15. Now, originally, I imagined this was seasonally. When I first started, I thought every 2 weeks we'll knock out a milepost and another painting. That was a poor plan. I've been lucky in some years to get one out every year. There is an emotional aspect to it that I've had to learn to grow comfortable with and to just work around. My goal is to do this more frequently than I've done it in the past. So we'll see what happens in 2026. Now, when I conceived this idea of reading excerpts of Milepost today, I thought, let's revisit some favorites. Well, how can we do this? We can talk about some that sort of focus on Natchez specifically, to give you all a little history of what it's like to live in the Little Easy. Natchez is considered the oldest continuously inhabited settlement on the Mississippi River. We're a few hours north of New Orleans, so should you find yourself nearby, odds to come on up river and come see what we're all about. Our main industry here is tourism. The infrastructure here is historic. Natchez was a Union loyalist town during the Civil War, so much of what remains is what was here. Late 1700s, mostly early 19th century, a lot of early 1800s and later. But it's sort of been a main character in a lot of my writing, been sort of the impetus and inspiration behind a lot of the stories. And most of what I write about, Natchez is the backdrop for a lot of those stories, and takes place, with mostly Ken being the other characters involved in the writing and such. Now, I was thinking I'd share something from Milepost 3, Everybody's Free to Feel Good. And I thought, ooh, well, maybe Milepost 6, because that's where I feel like I really found my footing and really started to understand what this writing element was doing for me creatively. Um, I do hope y'all will check that one out. Milepost 6, What the World Needs Now. And I thought, ooh, well, I could write about Milepost 8, Pay Attention in a World of My Own, paired with my Spider Lilies painting, which is also paired with Eudora Welty's Some Notes on River Country. This is an essay that I've returned to many times over the years. It's been a sort of handbook for me since becoming a Natchezian, something I actually write about in Milepost 15. It's a work of nonfiction, and it is basically her sharing where a lot of the her inspiration comes from, the settings in her fiction being as important as any of the story's characters or dialogue, which she is well known for. She writes about a sense of place, and that's inspired me greatly. And so I've returned to this text over and over again. In Milepost 8, she sort of serves as tour guide, interspersing excerpts from that essay with my story of recounting a day trip with my mother and my uncle Kenny, visiting a Mississippi ghost town and a couple of other local sites that are part of the sort of tourism circuit. But what I decided to do today is just go ahead and read the entirety of Milepost 15, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted, paired with Magnolia number 1. I've already recorded this once and did it with the excerpts from the other ones and decided, let's just read the damn thing. Now, initially, I would be sharing this first with the folks that subscribe to my newsletter. But since this is all going to come out right at the same time, hopefully you subscribers will forgive me for sharing it with the possums first. If you don't subscribe to my newsletter, I'd love for you to. Very easy. Go to my website, jameyhudnall.com. That's JameyHudnall.com. And you can subscribe by entering your email address at the foot of any page. At best, I email quarterly. That, again, 2026 goals to be more regular with both the writing of the mileposts and the issuing of the newsletters and stuff. But go ahead and mark yourself safe from excessive emailing, because it ain't going to happen. I'll pop up in your email maybe 4 times a year. But subscribers, with the exception of this particular instance, are going to hear about mileposts and new artwork first, events and stuff like that. So anyway, without further ado, no, I was going to make one other note. Why are they called mileposts? Mileposts are what the mile markers are referred to along the Natchez Trace. The Natchez Trace is a national scenic parkway that connects this community of Natchez, Mississippi with Nashville, Tennessee. It's a 444-mile scenic route that I often take from Natchez to Jackson. Now, there are other ways to get to Jackson, or up to I-20 rather, when I'm going to and from Atlanta. But it is the most peaceful respite. Yes, it's 50 miles an hour. Yes, if you get a ticket, it's coming from somebody patrolling the national parkway, so it's not just your average speeding ticket. But it is a place that I've done a lot of reflection, because it is just you and your thoughts. You're going to lose cell coverage, and I'm usually thinking about what's been going on in my orbit when I'm coming and going, whether I'm on my way to the North Georgia mountains to be alone and to paint and to write, or when I'm coming back to Natchez, to downtown Natchez, where I'll be surrounded by the cacophony of all the downtown goings on, neighbors and dogs and children and basketballs and horse carriages and traffic and deliveries and festivals and parades and tourism traffic and all the above. It's a blessed existence, and I really enjoy the back and forth of my life, whether I'm here in Southwest Mississippi or up in Northeast Georgia mountains, which I write about a lot. So again, I hope you will take the opportunity to read some of these mileposts if you enjoy this. And yeah. One other note I was going to write. I don't know that I've ever shared this, but the titles. Somebody had asked, where do the titles for all these mileposts come from? And they are song titles. My mother was an ordained United Methodist minister, and where she would have scripture to inspire her sermons. My writing comes from inspiration is music. I surround myself with music in the studio and obviously in the car and stuff like that, and just find it sort of the impetus as the place, the jump off point for me in writing. So, okay, those were the two notes that I wanted to make. And again, this is a mini, so don't want it to be all day. I'm shooting for half an hour. Okay, and without further ado, this is milepost 15, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted. It's paired with Magnolia 1, and it begins and ends with excerpts from Eudora Welty's Some Notes on River Country. The woods on the bluff are the hardwood trees, dark and berried and flowered. The magnolia is the spectacular one with its heavy cups. They look as heavy as silver, weighing upon its aromatic elliptical black-green leaves, or when it bears its dense pink cones. I remember in an old botany book, written long ago in England, reporting the magnolia by hearsay, as having blossoms so large as to be distinctly visible a mile or more, seen in the mass, we presume. But I tested the visibility of the magnolia, and the single flower can be seen for several miles on a clear day. Excerpt from Eudora Welty, Some Notes on River Country. There's a magnolia growing in front of a burned-out antebellum mansion here in town, on a site well known amongst locals, preservationists, and adventure-seeking teens, often reappearing on Mississippi's most endangered historic properties list year after year. Part of the local landscape since 1818-ish, the ruin of Arlington represents one of Natchez's earliest suburban villas. What's left of the house survives largely because the historic Natchez Foundation topped it with a new roof following the fire that gutted it back in 2002. The hope is that it would enable the owner to save the structure, but that's not what happened. Refusing all offers to sell, now it just sits like some Southern Gothic monument, long since stripped of its marble mantles, decorative plaster, and silver hardware by opportunistic midnight scavengers, periodically appearing in YouTube videos filmed and posted by folks with a taste for decay. Over the summer, I found myself passing the site 4 mornings a week on my way to and fro the county pool on the bypass to swim laps. I've been swimming in the tiled basement pool of one of the local Victorian schoolhouses, Carpenter 2, currently in use as the Natchez Senior Citizen Center. Tragically, that 112-year-old pool sprang a leak back in March and has been dry for the first time since World War II, when it was used as a pen to raise hogs for the war effort. Presently, the fate of the pool and its aquatic senior citizens is unknown, as the cost for repair are likely too great for the city to justify with so much need elsewhere in the community. As an alternative, the city of Natchez kindly made available 2 hours at the county pool Tuesday through Friday before their daily 8 a.m. opening. So beginning in June, I was rising at 5 a.m. to swim laps at 6 a.m., passing the burned-out shell of Arlington pre- and post-swim. The outdoor facility is relatively new, featuring 8 swim lanes alongside a gradual entry shallow end with various jets and fountains, a stark contrast to the tiled basement pool of the Victorian schoolhouse. It's a very nice facility, though it's in need of some TLC and a good custodian, but overall, it was a great experience. Seeing the sunrise through the bleachers of Natchez High's football field was the cherry on top of a long summer. In addition to the lap swimmers, there was also a large group of ladies taking advantage of the facility, participating in the early morning water aerobics. Swimming the evenings, I only ever encountered a couple older men doing the same, but with just a 2-hour window to get a workout in, the full roster of pool enthusiasts was encountering one another for the first time. Accompanied by the tunes of Motown, the morning session was the antithesis to the quiet swims I was accustomed to. Having long preferred the company of women, it was a gift to witness the camaraderie and community of the early morning risers, kindly greeting me with encouragement like, "Let them calories have it, baby," while the Supremes, the Jackson 5, and the Marvelettes doo-wopped us through our routines while dawn became day over the Miss Lou. Like all things, the arrangement had an expiration date. The seasons changed and the weather cooled, and it's become unclear as to what us swimmers will do without a pool to call home. Like it or not, looks like it's seated chair aerobics for us until it's warm enough to swim outdoors again. Concurrently, I returned to a large painting of a magnolia tree begun eons ago, forgetting until mid-July that the very tree I was painting was actually the one thriving out in front of the ruin of Arlington. Now almost completely obscured from the road, only its highest branches are visible, as the property is no longer tended and a thick brush has grown up around everything. I photographed this tree way back in 2017, thinking I'd wrap up its painting in a month or two, but that's not what happened. I used to delude myself into believing that these grand projects could be completed in a few grindstone weeks, but those efforts were never successful. Instead, I ended up sidestepping this painting repeatedly in favor of other projects, intimidated by the magnitude of work involved to get it across the finish line. And so it was moved from the studio to storage and sat in wait for many seasons. But I was determined to check Mississippi State Flower off my list, a list that my mother began for me 20 years ago in an email written while I was in Cortona, Italy, with the University of Georgia Studies Abroad program. I'd been lamenting how I couldn't find my footing in that landscape, wondering what in the world my Southern-inspired painting had to do with Tuscany. But Mama insisted there'd be parallels between Cortona and home if I looked hard enough, and rattled off every little thing she loved about the South. Magnolia, tomatoes, okra, and pralines, wisteria, gumbo, cheese straws, and old ladies, creating a checklist that's proven dense enough to keep me busy throughout this lifetime and the next. A list I've been checking off, one by one, for the last 9 years. Arlington's magnolia was the most impressive specimen I could find downtown, with enough distance to capture its blossoms in macro perspective. Shooting from the road, avoiding the snakes surely hiding in the waist-tall grass, I could see Arlington's facade peeking out from behind the grand semi-hardwood. And what struck me through the camera lens that day was the sense of place that so fascinated and inspired Eudora Welty, her settings being as important as any character's dialogue. Right over there, behind that magnolia, in a structure handcrafted by the enforced labor of enslaved Africans, was supposedly the largest depository of recorded Western knowledge and history in this corner of the world. Amassed and displayed in its library for nearly 2 centuries, bound scripts of references, scientific studies, fiction, and poetry, only an infinitesimal percentage of the local population had the necessary education to read and comprehend, sat just 75-ish yards from my parked car, until it didn't. Now what was once the site of hive-like activity sits quietly, charred and abandoned, a dreary backdrop for a younger magnolia. The impermanence of it all is what stands out to me. Despite our best efforts, nothing lasts forever. What once represented the pinnacle of Western progress is now merely more than an eyesore for passing traffic. It's reminiscent of the way Eudora described our neighbor, Port Gibson, in the 1940s, as stuck in a slow, prolonged decay. In her essay, Some Notes on River Country, a beloved text which has become a sort of handbook for me since becoming a Natchezian. Upriver, Port Gibson was one of many former important, significant 18th and 19th century lower Mississippi river ports, when the Great Waterway served as North America's premier interstate thoroughfare. It was described by General Grant during the Civil War as too pretty to burn, which provided it the opportunity to become what it is today. Though still a charming town with friendly residents and significant historic architecture, many would think of it as home to the nearest nuclear power plant. Welcome or not, change is just unavoidable. Consider the Methodist Church. It recently settled a major schism, splitting in two, United Methodists to the left, Global Methodists to the right. Though efforts were made to remain united, that's not what happened. Essentially, there was an impasse, the roots of which differed depending on the half you ask. Experiencing this split firsthand, Jefferson Street, formerly United Methodist Church of Natchez, Mississippi, was long the house of faith generations of Junkins and Hudnalls were associated. Collectively, as a family, we share memories of our weddings, baptisms and funerals, Lents and Easters, Advents and Christmases, as well as decades of various tasks of service. But more than the potential difficulty of saying goodbye to a place that's marked so many of our milestones, where people's names live on in stained glass, on plaques acknowledging financial contributions for organs and church bells and elevators, having to witness my father weather the transition is the hurt that will sting throughout many seasons. Courageously, he spoke his mind amidst the debates, worrying he'd be ostracized for it. And when it became clear that his efforts were unwelcome, gracefully, he accepted the change of seasons and bid the old church house and its congregants farewell, taking with him 80 years of memories, the most significant being those of the young gal from the church youth group whom he made his wife, a woman that returned with him 33 years later an ordained United Methodist minister, delivering the last sermons of her career before the altar at which they were married, baptized their sons, and she memorialized. In the end, the congregation voted overwhelmingly to divorce itself from the United Methodists in a vote of 140 to 26, with 2 abstaining, opting to be globalists instead. In their transition, they stripped the name and symbols of their past identity, marquee, stationery, and hymnals included. Ironically, despite changing the covers of their songbooks, the congregation still sings the same hymns, just newly unburdened by the members whose values did not align with their own. Post-rebrand, the globalists thoughtfully stacked the United hymnals aside to be claimed by the folks who donated them or by their surviving relations. Returning to retrieve those gifted in memory of my assorted kin, I encountered several large, unclaimed stacks, one in particular of nearly 40-plus hymnals, all dedicated to the same church member, a woman few living congregants would recall, and whose memory at Jefferson Street largely exists now within a stack of discarded, unclaimed songbooks. At one time, this person was clearly beloved by the congregation and honored in hymnal after hymnal, but today she's unknown, forgotten, and what represented the adoration of her community now sits unclaimed, marred by symbols of a church deemed too radical by the majority of its members. Though the disaffiliation process liked to kill us all, I am grateful for the seasons I intersected with Jefferson Street United Methodist Church, especially the brief season I was a member, preparing their communion with my cousin Sadie, hearing her sister Laura Lee and my father sing in the choir, seated alongside my Aunt Paula. After Sunday service, we'd lunch at Stanton Hall's carriage house, feasting on everything from candied bacon and grits and griots to their signature mini biscuits and fried chicken. But like the heydays of Arlington and the United Methodists of Jefferson Street, even the carriage house is no more, shuttering suddenly after an 80-year run. Put simply, it's just best not to get too comfortable with life. You never know what's coming down the pike. I found myself in the Southwest Mississippi community by happenstance, never imagining I'd still be here more than a decade later, and oh, the irony. There was a time when I believed that residing in Natchez was akin to falling off the earth. I see myself seated with my Uncle Kenny in his little cottage on State Street, questioning how men like us could spend a whole lifetime in a one-horse town, his answer being, well, this has always been home. Seeing ourselves across a generation gap, I just couldn't picture that kind of life for myself. Too many backwards people to put up with, too many concessions. But like the encouragement in Mama's email, there'd be similarities if I looked hard enough, though at 25 I thought, no, never, not for me. But that's not what happened. Unbelievably, 20 years hence, I found myself back in Kenny's cottage sharing drinks with cousins who's made his former home their own. And I cannot accurately describe the stunningly surreal experience of returning to Kenny's house without him there all these years later. Crowded around the kitchen island, amidst the camaraderie, I can't help but see the two of us sharing drinks in the adjacent room, him reassuring me that Natchez is exactly where he wanted to be, and that it might make sense to me someday, despite my incredulity. Undoubtedly, way up in the hereafter, he's got to feel a little satisfaction at the surprising providence of my landing smack dab in the center of what I considered in my youth to be the black hole of opportunity. The great mystery to all, myself included, is why I've stayed so long, a lingering question that's resurfaced regularly, especially in my writing. Despite the warm support of Natchezians and all my efforts to feel some belonging, nothing about my trying to make a life for myself here has been easy. But since losing my Aunt Paula, the last of a generation of heroes who circled their wagons for me throughout the years, I believe I can finally see the forest for the trees. Amongst some hard lessons, I think my greater purpose here was in repaying my team, my Earth Angels, the aunts and cousins and surrogate grandparents that put me back together after Mama died. Unknowingly, as we were sorting me out, I was here walking them home, accompanying them, learning from them, unaware we were participating in their final chapter. And had it only happened once, then perhaps it would be a stretch to think it faded, but that's not what happened. With the exception of Kenny and Mama, whose passings brought me to this storied port, I was present for my heroes' departures, helping when new ailments arose, keeping things moving when memory failed, mobility waned, bodies gave out, nursing homes entered. Across my Natchez tenure, I've carried my whole team to their final resting place, literally. Kenny, Mama, Ellen, Christine, Louis, and Paula, in addition to many other beloved kin. And now, the folks I shared drinks with every Friday night for a decade in a place I never meant to call home are finally all back together again in the Natchez City Cemetery, and I find myself alone in the quietest season of this lifetime, Mid-40s, I sense an unspoken worry amongst family and friends, understandably. They want me happy, fulfilled, whatever is required to make that so. And though sometimes I feel restless in Natchez, I'm not unhappy. Quite the opposite, actually. I love our home and my studio and street and neighbors and downtown and proximity to family and the river, but in seasonal bits, balanced with escapes back to the North Georgia mountains to paint and write in solitude whenever possible. It's a significant change from my previous seasons. My years have been jam-packed with friends, wild times, and frivolity, with little time spent alone. The calamity of 2020 taught me that quiet is actually necessary for me, and amongst the quiet, I am my own best company and support, a lesson many, many years in the making. The fact is, I've been alone a long, long time now, and it's possible that in seasons to come that won't change. I'm not sure I have the patience to put up with anyone besides myself, and I'm okay that at the end of the day when the lights go out, it's just me. No fella, no kids, no pets, just Jamey. While this existence is not for everyone, being alone in southwest Mississippi and northeast Georgia brings me great joy, unapologetically. It's true that once upon a time, roomfuls of strangers felt exciting and full of possibility, but now they give me the heebie-jeebies and I avoid them whenever possible. The most I'm willing to participate in these days is a shared meal with friends or occasional drinks with cousins, a necessary diversion to remind me I'm human. After all, my kin and I love a good hug, giving and receiving, and you can't outrun your genetics. So like Brigadoon, every so often I'll reappear, do the hugs, have some drinks, laugh till I cry, and then vaporize back into the mist. Were I forced to acknowledge any blues, I'd say the season of my life I miss the most is the one where I had a mother. And if you're familiar with these mileposts, it should come as no surprise that old Jamey Hudnall will find a way to bring up his mama. But I've learned to grow comfortable with the eye roll effect the grief expressed in my writings and associated paintings have on some people. Can this mama's boy please move the fuck on? Simply, those feelings had to go somewhere, and in the past I've felt apologetic about it and minimized my sentiments at times, but in a world filled with countless diversions, I say go eat a wiener. Watch Netflix. I'm working up to something here. At 28 onward, I could not picture what life would look like without Faye Junk and Hudnall. The holidays, milestones, losses, and I've wallowed and waxed on plenty in paint and prose. Mama was wonderful in all the ways. Luminous, witty, adventurous, encouraging, irreplaceable. But what's certain is that she'd be eye-rolling at excessive woe-is-me behavior too. So nowadays, instead, amidst my joyful solitude, I focus on the 28 years of good times, dutifully continuing with the list she left behind, checking off box after box. Deviled eggs, check. Paddle wheelers, check. Wisteria, crawfish, dogwood blossoms, blueberry cobbler, check, 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 check. Mardi Gras beads, check. Watermelon and gingham tablecloths, check, check. Spider lilies, check. Old ladies, check. Magnolia, check. Should you live long enough, there's a good chance you'll see it all. The things you hoped, chased, dreaded. But remember, none of it's eternal, the good or the bad. Everything has its season. Like Arlington and my summer swims, the United Methodists of Jefferson Street and the Carriage House Buffet. Regardless of what comes next, we can be sure that it won't last. We can be sure that it won't last because nothing does except our love, even when those to whom it belongs are no longer here to receive it. Plainly, change is omnipresent. Sometimes it's unwelcome, but not always. It's just life. So don't fret the change of seasons, especially if you find yourself charred and abandoned. After all, it's been affirmed that it's possible to spot a magnolia blossom from several miles away on a clear day. Count on the buds to reappear, and when they do, be reminded that another season is forthcoming and change is on the way once again. I'd like to salute Mr. and Mrs. McAndrews for the many decades they kept the antiquated basement pool of Carpenter 2 maintained and accessible via water aerobics classes and lap swimming. There's not another indoor facility anywhere else in the Miss Lou, and our waistlines and tickers owe them a debt of gratitude. Mr. Mack and I have been swimming together 3 times a week for the past 14 years. He's 94 now, meaning he was a sprightly 80-year-old whippersnapper when I took my first dip into the healing waters of the old schoolhouse. Expecting to see him at the 6 a.m. swims over the summer, he never showed. delivering a message through Mrs. McAndrews that it was much too early for him to think about swimming as it interfered with his morning routine, opting for a Planet Fitness membership he could utilize at his convenience instead. Inspiringly, maybe I can make the best of seated chair aerobics until it warms up again. Honestly, it's worth a try, so long as it's accompanied by the chattering and encouragement of senior ladies burning calories in tandem with Motown's classic melodies, if only for a season. Tawanda, y'all. The clatter of hooves and the bellow of boats have gone, all old communications. The old Natchez trace has sunk out of use, it is deep in leaves. The river has gone away and left the landings. The boats from Liverpool do not dock at these empty crags. The old deeds are done, old evil and old good have been made into stories. As plows turn up the river bottom and the wild birds fly now at the level where people on boat deck once were strolling and talking of great expanding things, and of chance and money. Much beauty is gone, many little things of life. To light up the night, there are no mansions, no celebrations, just as when there were mansions and celebrations, there were no more festivals of an Indian tribe there. Before the music, there were drums. Another excerpt from Eudora Welty, some notes on River Country. And if you made it this far, I'm appreciative, y'all. That, again, was Milepost 15, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted, paired with Magnolia 1, both to be released here pretty soon. So, again, thank you for joining me. Hope you made it all the way through. And yeah, y'all are much appreciated. So take care, possums. Keep an eye out for the three of us. We should be reunited in a couple of weeks to bring y'all a wrap up from our first year of potting. So yeah, y'all are much appreciated. Be good and see y'all next time. Bye.